Business is brought to you by Audible.com.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Married with a Business. I'm Craig.
And I'm Allison.
And we're Married with a Business. We're here to share tips, tricks, stories of what it's like to be a married couple that own and operate a business together.
Yeah, so Craig, what have you been getting into lately?
It's actually really interesting. Our son, who is now in 7th grade, plays a lot of baseball, starting to play more and more competitive baseball. In his program this year, brought in mental health like support training for athletes as part of what they're doing. So it's like this online training. So you watch these videos, they talk about, the mental health of playing sports and how to get your mind right when you're going up to bat or when you're supporting your team and all that. It's called the Focus Forge, and it's really interesting. It's been really interesting to sit and watch that with him.
Yeah, I'm really excited that they're including this as part of their program because there is so much of a bad culture in town and club sports that I think I'm really glad we're in a club where they're promoting mental health and how to get these players in a good place personally and athletically.
Well, and I think in to the credit of the Mass Captains, which is the baseball program that Miles is in, to the credit to them, I think that they're more concerned about building baseball players and about building good teammates and smart kids, and not necessarily just about winning. Not that winning's not important. Winning is important, but I think they're doing a good job of like not making it feel so much like, oh, we have to get that trophy, we have to get that ring.
Yeah, and taking the perspective of building a well-rounded person and not just it be glorified daddy ball, because a lot of the people have played in college and played professionally. And so I think they're seeing a bit more holistic picture of our kids, which is really good because my 12-year-old thinks he knows everything he needs to do mental health wise, and he doesn't.
No, and I think that's the struggle that I'm having with it is that, he's like, I don't need this. He's 12 years old. He's like, I know everything. I'm so good. And I love the confidence that he has. But in the same sense, I'm hoping that, every time we watch it together and listen to what the guy has to say, I hope that he gets like a drop or two of like good information that sticks with him.
Yeah, because coaching is really important. And I think that we talk about, there's a coach for everything. But everything we do needs somebody who has focused specifically in that area of life, right? So we don't know what we don't know until we've gone through it, which is why coaching and mentoring is so important. And our guest today is exactly that person. I'm super excited to be joined by Kristina St, who is a certified divorce coach, and she's the founder of Kristina St Coaching, and she specializes in working with busy women and moms who are balancing the demands of their careers and their families while also trying to navigate the divorce process, which is so complex and so complicated. And so many people go through it, but there doesn't ever seem to be a good, here's how you handle it well. So I'm really grateful that one of our friends of the podcast, Victoria Robillard, who works with Edward Jones, reached out and said, hey, I think this would be a great person to talk to, even though you guys are talking about being married and running a business together. There's also a lot of people who are married, running a business together, and getting divorced.
So yeah, take a few minutes here and listen to our interview with Kristina St. Hey everybody, we're happy to have with us this week Kristina St. a certified divorce coach. Kristina, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today.
So I have to say, we've had a lot of people on the show. Most of them are husbands and wives like Allison and I that own and operate businesses together. We talk a lot on the show about what it's like to be married and owning and operating a business together. But this is a little different for us. Certified divorce coach, kind of talking about like what you might have to go through with that. How did you get into being a certified divorce coach?
Yeah, definitely a little different, I think, than your typical guests, but hopefully not relevant for too many of your listeners. But what I like to tell people when I introduce myself is, I'm a certified divorce coach. I hope you will never need me, but you'll probably know someone who will, right? Especially with the rates of divorce just generally. And then, Allison had sent me a stat prior about divorce rates for entrepreneurs too, which is particularly high. So how I got into this is I went through my own divorce and I learned about coaching through that process. Divorce is a really challenging life transition. And I was a working mom, 2 little kids, and just found the process to be pretty overwhelming. And I also found that, I was just trying to find others who had been through the process. I wanted information. I wanted to hear experiences. I wanted to figure out how to do this, how to navigate it, how to not get it wrong. And I sought out, a few of those people. I didn't have too many people in my life that had experienced divorce. And then when I started going through my own process, I found the same thing was happening to me, that people were seeking me out once they knew that I was going through divorce, and they really wanted the same thing: information, guidance, validation, to know that they're not going to get it wrong for their kids. In my entire career, I've worked in very mission-driven organizations. I've only worked in the nonprofit field prior to this. And so I knew that I wanted to take this experience and be able to help others. I knew so much more, going through my process and navigating it and coming out on the other side intact for the most part. And then how do I take that and turn that to help others? And that's really where the coaching piece came in. And I think the stars just aligned in terms of skill set and passion, experience, all coming together.
It's so interesting. I had never even heard of a specialization in divorce coaching before, but it makes a lot of sense because there are so many specific nuances of the things you have to go through. What do you think what do you see as the biggest challenge for most of your clients when they come to you getting started? Or is it just across the board varies?
So what I have found, I do specialize and work primarily with women that, I have that lived experience. So I think that really adds something when they're working with me. But my clients have found me super early in the process. I think that although there is so much information out there about divorce, it ends up just adding to the overwhelm, right? You just imagine, you yourselves, right, are busy working parents, you're running a business, you have a lot going on. And so adding on top of that, needing to navigate this huge life transition, there's just information overload, I think, in our society. And so what I found are these women and moms end up finding me early in the process because they're seeking information. They want to figure out where do I even start? Where do I even begin? How is this going to affect my kids in the process? How can I show up the best for them? And I think too, one unique piece about the divorce coaching is that it feels you're taking a step, right? You're taking that first step, but it's a little less scary than hiring an attorney on retainer, right? That feels, I think, just maybe not more permanent, but it feels bigger and heavier than, maybe learning a little bit, coming up with a plan, figuring out some skills or tools, resources that you can use, and then taking that next step to work with an attorney.
Yeah, I would think that if somebody's on the verge of thinking about or wanting to start the divorce, process, they need to have somebody to kind of help them, guide them through that. And that sounds like exactly what you do. What are some things that they, even maybe before contacting you or when that first all starts to come into their mind, what are some steps that they should take to get organized and prepared to start that process?
Well, it's funny. So, right, this is a business podcast, and I often say that divorce is also a business. That's a huge side of the process, unfortunately, is the financial piece and just what I like to call the business of divorce. And so that means getting all of your financial information in order. This is likely, depending on where you are in life, going to be one of the biggest financial transactions that you could potentially make. And so there's a lot of paperwork involved. There's a lot of documents that you need to gather for the court process. There's a lot of budgeting information. And I think the heaviest piece is the decision making, right? So you want to gather all that information so you have data and facts about your real life situation. But then you also need to use that to make really, hopefully good decisions for your family. And I think one of the biggest challenges is that you can't separate the emotions from this business side, right? You have to get the business side done, but how do you navigate managing your emotions through this process so that you can approach it really with clarity and confidence, because these are long-term decisions you're making.
And how do you see, especially for your clients who are professional or running business, how do you see that emotional stress typically affects them?
I mean, I think it's really similar to how it affects most of us, right? Especially parents. So a lot of times the stress starts to manifest itself physically, right? Do you start getting more headaches? You're feeling extra exhausted. It can be really hard to focus, whether it's in your day-to-day life or in managing the divorce process. And so one of the biggest pieces that I end up working with folks on to start is focusing on their own well-being, right? It sounds so, I think, basic and foundational sometimes, but it's all the same things that we all need to get through our busy, day-to-day lives. How are you taking care of yourself? Have you eaten or drank any water today? Can you take 10 minutes for yourself? What is something that makes sense for you and within your life to fill up your cup so that you're able to keep showing up in the different ways that you need to for your own life and family?
Do you see a lot of pushback when you ask that question to people, that and how do you help them work through that? I don't have time to do those things.
Yeah, so I definitely get I don't have time. That comes up a lot. Sometimes we use our sessions as like little self-care sessions. I had one client who would come racing from, she also saw clients of her own. She had a big job where she was constantly helping others, and she would show up to our sessions, rushing in, not having gone to the bathroom or had something to eat. And we would just pause. I'm like, this is your time. Like, we have reserved this time. Go get something to drink. You can come back in 5 minutes, whatever you need, so that you feel grounded enough to focus on this process. And I think it's not that these people don't know the right things to do, right? I think half of my clients have actually been therapists or counselors or some kind, right? They know exactly what they need to be doing, but sometimes it's just reminding them that it's actually okay, that they're allowed to take time for themselves, and that it's actually going to help them get through the process.
Yeah, and I would think that that's like that's a big part of it. Like, a lot of times people, especially I would think going into the divorce process, don't seek out that help, that support, that therapy or coaching, or however you want to put it. And I think that there's obviously a huge value to finding someone like you to help them kind of talk through all of those challenges that they might see through the process.
Yeah, I think, there's so much fear. There's so many emotions with divorce, right? There's fear. You're fearful of what comes next, of the unknown, of whether or not you can do this. There's a lot of shame or guilt or even blame that comes up too. But just getting back to the fear piece, right? There's also fear around money. Divorce can be really costly. And I think before going into it, you just have this idea of, oh, this is just going to cost me so much money. And I think people often let that prevent them from seeking the various supports that they really need, and that might actually save them time and money in the long run.
So where does somebody like you, who's a certified divorce coach, come into that puzzle piece for them and compared to their lawyer or their financial advisor? How do you work with them to make sure that they're getting the most value from those two parts of their team?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that I do love doing and really emphasize for clients is to build that divorce team. So I think a value add that I bring is making referrals to those other professionals so that they, clients don't have to spend time Googling and searching through and trying to figure out, well, who the heck is the right fit for me? I can hand them, one or two names. They go talk to these individuals. I think they can help because of, whatever reason. And one of the things we can do in their sessions is think through, okay, what is going to be the best use of your attorney's time? Or if you get 15 minutes to have, a free consultation with an attorney, what are the questions that you want to ask that attorney to see if they're the right fit for you? Because they're not going to answer all of your questions. You're not going to be able to get legal advice in that short period of time. But what I want to help them do is make sure that they're finding the right people to support them through this process, because that's much more important, that they have the right fit. And then we can make sure throughout the process that they're utilizing, those resources to the best of their abilities.
We've talked a lot about like the financial side of it, the business side of it, if you will. But there is, in a lot of divorces, not every divorce, but there is in a lot of divorces, that parenting side of it, right? Like sometimes there's kids, little kids or whatever involved. And one of the things I think that you like really do focus and emphasize a lot with your clients is learning to co-parent and become how you can do it with confidence. Like, what are some of those like go-to strategies you have for people like trying to learn how to co-parent?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the biggest pieces of inspiration that got me into this, because I have two of my own kids, and I was so fearful of, is this going to ruin my kids for life? And I think that's a really common fear that other parents have, right? They really care about their kids and they want to protect them and do the best for them in this process. So one of the things that I say a lot with my clients is, how do we put our kids at the center and not in the middle? Right? We don't want our kids to get stuck in the middle of this process, but we really want to center them in all of our decision making. And I think that can be a really grounding piece for parents, especially when, emotions run high and they're getting triggered through the negotiation process. I think, our spouses know the best way to push our buttons, and whether they try to or not, that often comes out naturally in this divorce process. And so
I don't know what you're talking about.
I never push your button.
Never happens, right? Never.
All the time.
Yeah, we're the best at it. We know exactly which ones to press. But, one piece of advice I've heard from an attorney was, can you even bring a picture of your kids into the mediation process or into the room with you? How do you bring your kids in so that when you're thinking about, I don't know what, something you might be fighting over, like, are you just fighting over it? Are you just digging your heels in because you're feeling mad or upset in that moment? And is that really the best for your child? Right. So I found that to be at least a helpful framework to apply to different situations.
We talk a lot on the podcast and with each other about setting those boundaries of work time and home time. And especially when you're getting divorced and you're running a business or you're a professional, you have a little bit more of that. Like we talked about, you're now also in the business of getting divorced. How do you help your clients and how do you help your people work through that, setting those boundaries when they are dealing with the kids, where it's not, it is that putting them in the center, right? So that it's not always talking about the divorce and it's not talking about work. It's about how do you guide them through making sure that they're focusing on their kids or what's right in front of them.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up boundaries, because I think they apply in a number of different ways throughout this process. And so I think there's boundaries in terms of communication, right? Are there ways that you can set boundaries, whether with yourself or with others or with, your work schedule when you're with your kids, so that you can stay more present? I think the struggle so many of us have, and, comes up maybe more so in the divorce process, especially when you only have maybe less time with your kids. And so you really feel a strong sense of, how do I make the most of this time? If I only have them 50% of the time, things like, can you put a do not disturb on your phone for a certain period of time, whether that is immediately after school or during dinner or bedtime, right? So what are the strategies that you can use and what boundaries can you set so that you can be really intentional with the time that you have with your kids? I think one of the other areas that we often focus on is, it's not necessarily about the amount of time that you have, but it's about the quality of that time. You could spend all Saturday with them, but if you're on your phone the whole time or you're busy doing other things, it doesn't matter the amount. But if you can reserve 5, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever the amount is, to be really intentional with your kids, it's going to fill their cup and you're going to feel so much better about it too.
I think that's good parenting advice in general.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
You should find time to spend with your kids. One, I guess, obviously our podcast and this show's about, couples that own businesses together or work together. What are some strategies or what are some things that you would say to someone coming to you that is in a business with a spouse?
In a business with a spouse, or in a business with a spouse and getting divorced?
In a bit, yes. In a business, yes, both. But in a business with in a business with a spouse, getting divorced. Yeah.
So when I was, doing my thinking ahead of this show, I obviously gave a lot of thought to that question. And I think you're facing a double divorce. I don't know if that term has been coined, but I think if you co-own a business with your spouse and you're also going to navigate a divorce, it's going to be like doing a double divorce. I think your average person, has their career or their work life is one piece of their life that's their own, right? So they can go to work, they spend that time on their own, and then they come home. When you're going through divorce, you're navigating, that whole personal life transition. But I think it's extra challenging if you own a business, because you're going to have to figure out either how to maintain a really good relationship, and in some way, if you're going to keep working together in that business, or you're going to have to be really thoughtful about, okay, how are we going to navigate both sort of splitting our personal life, but then also splitting the business life as well. And I think all the more reason to really be thoughtful about building out your divorce team, and not to be adversarial, but to make sure that both sides have the supports that they need, that they have the experts involved, so that, I know how much it takes to put into a business and to build a business, and how much people care about that. You're right. That's another one of your babies. And so you want to be really thoughtful about how you're approaching that as well through the process.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about it too before we got on the talk with you. And I was like, we have seen both in, people that are friends or colleagues that we've seen get, husbands and wives that have gotten divorced owning their businesses. And we've seen ones where they've tried to stay together and run the business, but be divorced. And we've seen ones where it's very much adversely affected the business because they didn't know how to do that double divorce, as you said.
Yeah, it's been a lot. And as we always say we're trying to share tips and tricks about working together. And sometimes you need tips and tricks about not working together too.
Mm-hmm.
We always ask everybody if is there a good book or resource that you have found helpful, either for yourself or for your clients. Have you come across anything that you think is a good go-to book or resource?
Yeah. So one of the books that I read and actually listened to, and that was something different about the audio version of that and hearing this advice, was a book called Moms Moving On. And I, especially primarily working with women, I do work with the dads too. But it was just really helpful in terms of setting like my perspective and my mindset through the process. And the author, Michelle Dempsey-Multack, just did a really terrific job about the same thing. Like, how do we put our kids first, right? This is their lives too. And how are we showing up for them? How are we approaching challenging situations through this process? And I found that just incredibly grounding and helpful. And I think, the way one person shows up in the divorce process can really have a huge impact on the total interaction or the outcomes. So even if you are working, if a partner is being particularly challenging or not necessarily on the same page, just how one of those people are showing up to the process really does impact the outcomes. Obviously, it would be great if both people were able to show up, but it's hard. It's really hard, and we're only human. And I think the other resource that I just wanted to share too, that, is sort of a catch-all for anyone navigating this process, is called the Fresh Starts Registry. So this is a really great hub and resource for any individual navigating divorce. They have a ton of experts on there, a ton of free resources, and it's also like a gift registry for someone going through divorce that you can go on and register, because you now have to start a second household perhaps. And so just a really terrific resource that I would shout out to.
I love that idea.
Gifts, you get gifts for divorce.
Well, I mean, it's expensive though.
I know.
Like,
I would.
He gets the plates. You need new plates or pots or whatever.
You can have the plates. No, I'm just kidding.
I get everything.
I would it's really interesting to me. I'm sure we have a lot of listeners because we're a husband and wife team, and I will say with pride that we are in a good spot and we work well together, but there are probably a lot of listeners who, listen in that are trying to figure out how to work better with their spouses. One or the other might be listening to us. If they wanted to reach out to you and maybe talk about starting that process, how could they find you?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So I have a website, KristinaSt.coaching.com. And I always offer a complimentary coaching session. I think that's the best first step. It's a way for me to learn about them and their story, their challenges, and where they're at. And it's also a great way for potential clients to learn about me, to see if coaching is the right fit for them and to see if I'm the right fit for them. And I think my goal is always to just provide a lot of value, right? I know how hard this is, whether you're in the decision-making process, whether you've made the decision and you're trying to navigate the business side. I just want to be helpful. And, if working with me, obviously that's great. And if not, then I hope to be able to refer you to others who might be able to support you, because it's just a really hard and heavy decision. And so I think the more support you can get, the better.
Yeah, you shouldn't be out on an island by yourself trying to navigate all of this. So the idea of having somebody to be there, to be your coach, to help you through it is phenomenal.
And you don't know what you don't know sometimes, especially when you're getting started. So having somebody who has been through it, who has seen the ins and outs, and you have someone that you can go to and say, is this normal? Is feeling like this normal? Are these questions normal? Is really helpful. So I think having a certified divorce coach like you is a great step in including in that plan and that team, like you were talking about.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Kristina. We really enjoyed having you.
I have a million other questions I could
know.
ask you.
We could talk to you for hours about it, but we'll let people log online and find you and connect with you to ask those questions.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. It was so great chatting with you today.
Allison, so interesting. I know that, and she was very attuned to this, and we talked about it too. It's not the type of person we generally have on the podcast, right? It's usually we talk about how to make your relationship better, how to work together better. And this was interesting because it's like, okay, maybe you've reached a point where you are looking at getting a divorce and you do need some guidance. It was really interesting to hear that there's somebody who can coach you through that.
Right. But what she talks about with her clients is skills that can really help in all sorts of interpersonal relationships too. Not just the process of divorce. Yes, that's one thing, but you can translate a lot of those skills that she kind of helps you work through to the other relationships you're dealing with. So it can help, and it can be very beneficial, because there are a lot of people who are probably listening, and there are a lot of people we know who are on that tipping point of, do I stay because we're running a business together? Do I stay because we've got kids, or will we all be happier and better if we end this relationship? Because like she said, a divorce is a business transaction too.
Well, and I also thought it was interesting because she had put some thought into the fact of like how we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners that are husband and wife couples. And and I love that she might have coined a phrase on our show called double divorce, which is kind of interesting because like when you are working with somebody and they are your business partner and you are getting a divorce personally, there's also probably some divorce that goes along with the business as well. So it's that idea of a double divorce was really interesting for me to kind of, nosh on in my head.
Yeah. And she, in the beginning of the interview, alluded to the fact that when we were chatting, I had shared some statistics that I pulled up, and one study I was looking at suggested that the divorce rates among entrepreneurs range from 43 to 48%. And the national average range is typically higher than the overall national divorce range, which is the national average is somewhere between 38 and 50%. It's not exactly known. So it's really interesting that, the demands of being in business together can put a lot of stress on people. We've talked to a lot of couples who are doing it really well and really successfully, but that's not necessarily the case with everybody. I think, you have to find that balance. You have to find that being in your own lane. You have to be working towards a common goal. And I've also talked to a lot of couples in business together who aren't working towards a common goal, and they're the ones who really struggle.
Yeah, and I think that, again, it was interesting to me, and I guess that we have had friends in the past that have gotten divorced. We've known business partners, married couples that are business owners together that have gotten divorced. And I think for me, like, I you hear things are great and then they're not together, and you don't think about all the stuff that kind of goes into preparing for a divorce for both sides. But the idea of like having to figure out co-parenting, the idea about finances, like, putting together that team that might help you figure out how are you going to handle this, not only emotionally and parentally, but financially too.
Well, and I think that some of the things that our past guests have talked about that have been making them successful are the things also that if you're not doing it well, contributes to those higher rates of divorce, right? And the higher rates of business failure, the time and the exhaustion. Owning a business takes a lot of energy. It's a lot. You sometimes work weekends. You often work more than average hours. You're chronically absent. Like we've talked about, we have had to find that balance between who's picking up more at work, who's picking up more at home, who's that main contact for the kids. If you're not doing those things, that leads to the burnout, the financial stress. If the business isn't doing well, that means home's not doing well. Those lack of boundaries. Everybody talks about, finding that balance of what's your role and what's your lane. Often in the beginning was very difficult. But the ones that we've seen who've been successful have found those lanes for each other and dividing the labor both at work and at home. I can't be the CEO at work and have to be the primary everything at home.
Right. And I think that, we see it a lot with couples that are successful, is that they do that. They do all of those things. They yin and yang each other. We say that a lot. They complement each other's weaknesses. And we say it all the time on our show. Like, personally, I'm a horribly messy person. I am not clean at all. I am terrible at cleaning up, but I'm a good cook. I love my wife. She's a very clean person. She's very organized. She can't cook to save her life. So we balance each other out. And that's a small thing, but it's a big thing when you start adding all the other things together.
If I had to take care of the finances at work, the marketing at work, the finances at home, the cooking, the cleaning, the kids, the doctor's appointments, the everything, we couldn't make this work. So we've got to we each have to help in both areas.
So check out Kristina. She was great. You can find her at Kristina St coaching.com. She's a certified divorce coach. She can help you out. She even said on her thing that, that first consult is free. So if you just want to reach out and talk to her and get her opinion about some things, definitely check it out. But Kristina St, awesome to have on the show. Really interesting. Didn't know we'd ever do a show about divorce, but it was really interesting that we did.
Well, I'm glad we did it before we needed to do it.
I hope we don't ever need to do it for you and me, but it was really good we got to talk about.
But like she says, someone we know probably does need her support.
Oh, absolutely. So definitely reach out if you do. Also, if you get a chance, reach out and download some books. You can get a free 30 days of Audible on us. All you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/bizmarried. That's audibletrial.com/bizmarried. And we'll give you a free 30 days of Audible. You can download books about divorce. You can download books about getting your marriage better. You can download books that are like just fun to listen to, like Harry Potter.
And Kristina suggested Moms Moving On as a book to check out.
So definitely go to audibletrial.com/bizmarried to get a free 30 days of Audible on us. And also don't forget to check us out. You can find us online. We are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You can find us on all of those places. Just look for @bizmarried or just search Married with a Business. And also check out our website, marriedwithabusiness.net. A lot of things there you can find out about us and learn about us.
Yeah, we've got resources. We've got information about our accountability groups. You can reach out to send us an email and share what you have to say on the show.
Yeah, so check that out, marriedwithabusiness.net. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back with another show. And remember, not only is it important to focus on your business, but also your marriage, because we're married with a business.